We put up Christmas lights for the first time since my mom passed. It was her tradition, and we finally felt ready. The next morning, they were all ripped down. Wires cut. Our porch smashed. And taped to the front door was a note. Joy has no place in grief. Stop faking it. I checked the footage. It was our neighbor, wearing a black hoodie and gardening gloves. I reported it. The officer said, "This isn't her first time." But then she filed a cease-and-desist against us for emotional pollution. And when I showed up at court, my aunt was sitting next to her. Mom died in 2020. Sudden stroke. I was 22. My brother Ben was 10. We were numb for a long time. After the funeral, I boxed up all the Christmas stuff, the lights, the decorations, even the stockings, and shoved them into the basement. We didn't even put up a tree. Couldn't. It felt wrong. It felt like if we celebrated anything, we were betraying her. Every December, I'd see other houses glowing on our street in Asheville, North Carolina, and feel this weird mix of anger and sadness. I didn't blame them. I was jealous. They still had their moms. They still had reasons to smile. But this year, something shifted. Ben asked me, real quiet, "Can we maybe put up the lights this year?" I hesitated. I really did. But when I saw the way his eyes flicked away after he said it, like he was scared I'd say no, I nodded. So we pulled the bins from the basement, untangled the cords, plugged in each strand to see what still worked. Some were dead. Most were fine. My mom always took care of her things. Even the plastic reindeer, this big goofy thing she bought from a yard sale, was still in good shape, minus one cracked ear. We spent a full Saturday decorating the porch. I let Ben wrap the rails while I stapled the big bulbs across the top. We didn't play music or drink cocoa or anything cheesy. We just worked quietly, with our jackets zipped tight and our breath fogging in the cold. When we finished, I stepped back and looked at it all lit up. Blue and white. Gentle, nothing wild. Just like Mom used to do it. Ben whispered. "It looks like her." I almost lost it right then. That night, we sat inside and watched the glow from the window. It didn't fix anything, but it softened something in me. Like maybe it was okay to feel a little light again. Then came the next morning. I opened the door around 7 a.m. to grab the paper. And I just stood there. Everything was destroyed. The lights were ripped down, wires cut, left in a pile on the bottom step like trash. The reindeer had been smashed, its plastic legs broken and bent like it had been stomped. The porch railings were scraped up like someone dragged something sharp across them, over and over. And taped right to our front door was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Centered. "Joy has no place in grief. Stop faking it." I don't even remember walking back inside. I just remember my hands shaking as I pulled up the camera footage on my laptop. It was dark. 2:47 a.m. A figure walked right up our driveway. Black hoodie. Gardening gloves. Tall. Slow. Like she wasn't in a hurry. Like she wanted to take her time. She pulled down the lights one by one. Cut them with what looked like pruning shears. Then she took a metal rod, I think it was a curtain rod from her porch, I recognized it, and started smashing the reindeer and scratching the railings. She didn't look at the camera once. But I knew who it was. Ms. Ryman. Our neighbor from 2 houses down. Retired. Lived alone. Kept to herself. But always watching. Always frowning when kids laughed too loud. Complained if trash cans were out past noon. Hissed at dogs that barked. I called the police. A local officer came out, watched the footage, and sighed. "That's her," he said. "You know her?" He rubbed his face. "Yeah." "That's not her first time." "Doing what?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable. "Look, off the record, she's got a history. Files noise complaints during birthdays. Harris's families who put up decorations after a death. Says it's emotional pollution. Says people are dishonoring the dead by pretending they're okay. It's messed up. So why is she still out here doing this? People drop the charges. She threatens legal stuff, files harassment countersuits. Most folks just want her to go away. She's smart. Knows how to work the system." I looked at the mess on our lawn. My brother's face when he saw it later. I wasn't just mad, I was shaking. This was hate, wrapped in some twisted idea of what grief should look like. So I filed the report. I sent the footage to the HOA. I told every neighbor on our block. Most of them weren't surprised. A few told me their own stories. One woman said Ryman mailed her a card that said, "God hears fake laughter." But then the letter came. Certified mail. Thick envelope. Lawyer's office on the return address. Cease and desist. The reason? Emotional pollution and intentional aggravation of bereavement symptoms. I sat on the floor and read it 3 times. She was suing me for putting up lights. Lights that honored my mother. A week later, the court date came. I wore a black jacket. Tried to stay calm. But when I walked into the courtroom, I stopped in my tracks. Sitting next to Ms. Ryman at the plaintiff's table was my Aunt Sharon, my mother's older sister. She hadn't called in 2 years. Barely came to the funeral. No cards. No check-ins. I assumed she'd cut ties for her own reasons. But there she was, dressed like she belonged in that courtroom, nodding along with Ryman like they were old friends. She didn't even look surprised to see me. Just tilted her head like I was the one who needed explaining to do. I wanted to throw up. There was a story here I didn't know. But I was about to find out. I didn't say anything to Aunt Sharon in the courtroom. I just sat down, kept my eyes forward, and waited for the judge. Ryman looked smug. She had a small binder with her. Tabs sticking out like she'd been planning this for months. She didn't look at me either. Just kept flipping through pages like this was all routine. The judge walked in. Called the session. Asked Ryman to present her case. She stood up with that same cold calm I saw on the security footage. Your Honor, she said, my emotional safety and mental health have been repeatedly violated by the defendant's intentional and aggressive holiday display, which was resurrected after years of respectful mourning in the neighborhood. It is my belief that this display was done not to honor the deceased, but to provoke those still experiencing active grief. She said it like she was reading out of a medical textbook. The judge asked for her evidence. She pulled out printouts. Photos of my house at night with the lights on. A copy of her therapist's brief response analysis, which I later found out was a document she wrote herself. Then came the kicker, a typed statement from Aunt Sharon. It read, my sister would not want her memory turned into a display. She believed in quiet grief. I support Ms. Ryman's decision to take legal steps to preserve emotional peace. I couldn't sit still anymore. Excuse me, Your Honor, I said. That's not true. The judge looked at me, surprised. You'll get your turn. When it was finally my turn to speak, I told the truth. I showed the footage. I showed the report. I said how the lights were my mom's tradition. How we hadn't put them up in 3 years. How this was the first time we felt okay doing it. How Ryman destroyed them and left a note like a threat. The judge looked between us for a long time. Then he said we'd reconvene in 2 weeks. Outside the courtroom, I walked straight up to Aunt Sharon. What are you doing? I asked. My voice shook, but I didn't yell. She looked tired. Older than I remembered. She helped me, she said, nodding toward Ryman. After your mom died. I was alone too. No one talked to me. I was invisible. But Elaine understood. Elaine. So they were close enough to use first names now. She talked to me about how performative grief is ruining mourning in this country. She opened my eyes. To what? I snapped. To the idea that lighting up a house means you don't miss someone? She didn't answer. Just stared at me like I was too young to get it. I walked away. Got in my car. Drove straight home. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed up reading everything I could find about Ms. Ryman. I found old HOA meeting notes. Emails between neighbors. Even a blog she once wrote under a fake name. All of it pointed to one thing: she didn't believe in healing. She believed in owning grief. And anyone who smiled too soon? That made her the victim again. Then I found something else. A police report from 2015. A different town. Same last name. Same pattern. A Christmas display slashed up. Widow threatened with letters. Guess who filed the harassment complaint afterward? Elaine Ryman. She'd been doing this a long time. The next day, I knocked on 3 doors. Talked to people who had lived on our street for decades. One of them, Mrs. Deakins, invited me in and told me everything. She lost her daughter in a crash 15 years ago. Girl was 19. Beautiful. Smart. After that, Elaine changed. Said happiness was dangerous. Said pretending to be fine was why people got hurt. But she never let herself heal. She just made her pain everyone else's problem. I thanked her. I had a better picture now. But I also knew something Aunt Sharon didn't. My mom and Ryman used to be friends. Years ago, before I was born. Church events. Garden clubs. Potlucks. But something happened. Some falling out. I never knew what. Until I found Mom's old journal. I hadn't touched her boxes since she passed. But something told me to look. And there it was. A blue hardcover book labeled 2007. Inside was an entry. Elaine told me today I was grieving wrong. Said I was making a mockery of death by living normally again. I told her to stay away from my kids. She said one day, grief will find them properly. That was the last time we spoke. I stared at the page for an hour. I wasn't just her target. I was part of a promise she made to my mom years ago. And now I was going to finish what Mom started. The journal changed everything. It wasn't just some neighborhood dispute anymore. Ryman wasn't acting on impulse. She had a pattern. A belief system. And for some twisted reason, my mom had been her enemy long before I was old enough to notice. I kept reading that entry over and over. One day, grief will find them properly. That wasn't just bitterness. That was a threat. The next morning, I scanned the journal and printed the page. Then I got copies of every police report I could find on Ryman, 3 in Asheville, 1 in Winston-Salem, 1 from Georgia. Always similar: vandalism, anonymous notes, then counter lawsuits. She'd made grief into a weapon, and the system kept letting her get away with it because she always masked it behind trauma. So I made a plan. First, I posted in a local subreddit under an anonymous name. I asked if anyone else had had holiday-related conflicts with Ryman. Within a day, I got 5 replies. One man said she left a dead wreath on his porch after his wife died. Another said she reported their family to CPS for emotional neglect, because their kids were laughing too loud after a funeral. One woman even shared a photo of a typed letter she got in 2021 that read, "You dishonor your child by pretending life continues. Stop pretending the season makes it better." It was the same font, same formatting, as the note taped to my door. That's when I knew I had enough to push back. But I wasn't going to just defend myself in court. I was going to take her down on record. I started organizing everything: timestamps, testimonies, screenshots, community posts, the journal page, even archived footage from a neighbor's old doorbell cam that caught Ryman shouting at a family for putting up balloons on a dead relative's birthday. But the biggest crack came from a woman named May. She messaged me privately and said, "She wasn't always like this. I was her daughter's friend. I can tell you what really happened." So we met for coffee. May told me that Ryman's daughter, Ellie, died in a car crash in 2009. But it wasn't just any crash. She wasn't the driver, May said. She was in the passenger seat. They were coming home from a Christmas party. The driver had been drinking. Elaine couldn't forgive the other family. But no charges stuck. She said everyone just moved on. After that, Ryman started spiraling. She blamed the holiday. Blamed joy. Blamed healing itself. She said if the world didn't cry with her, it meant they were faking it. May said. She cut me off because I smiled at school 3 weeks later. That was the root of it. Frozen in time. Locked in her own pain, and determined to make sure no one moved past theirs. I asked May if she'd be willing to say that in court. She didn't even blink. Gladly. Back at the house, I started restringing the lights. Not because I thought it would solve anything, but because I wasn't going to let her win. Ben helped. He didn't ask any questions, just handed me the cords and checked the plugs. When we were done, I stood on the porch and turned everything on. The whole house glowed. And I made sure the security cameras were rolling. At 3:08 a.m. that night, she came back. This time, I was ready. I watched her live from my phone. Moving slow, same gloves, same hoodie. But as soon as she stepped foot onto the grass, my new motion lights popped on. Then a recorded message played from a speaker I'd hidden under the porch. "You are being recorded. Step away from the property. This footage is being sent directly to the police." She froze. Looked around. Then turned and walked back into the dark without touching a single thing. The next morning, I sent that footage to the officer from before. He called me an hour later. "We've got her on trespassing. If you want to press forward, we can open a full investigation now, past incidents, past complaints. But you're going to need a hell of a lot of backup." I said, "I have it." And then I emailed the judge's clerk. I told them I had new evidence. And new witnesses. This was no longer about lights. This was about truth. The courtroom looked smaller the second time. Maybe it was because this time, I wasn't scared. I had a binder with everything. Video stills, neighborhood complaints, the journal entry, police reports, witness statements, May's letter, and a map I made showing every house Ryman had targeted over the years. Aunt Sharon was there again. So was Ryman, still calm, still dressed like grief was a uniform. But this time, she didn't look so sure of herself. The judge came in and asked if we had new evidence. I raised my hand. I do, Your Honor. And a witness. I walked him through everything. I showed the footage from the motion-activated speaker setup. I played the message she heard and showed her walking away. I gave him copies of old police complaints from 5 different people in 2 different states. I shared the journal page my mom wrote about Ryman's threat. And then I handed him the final piece, May's written testimony. She wrote how Ryman changed after Ellie's death. How she blamed Joy. How she ruined every friendship. How she punished others for healing. She even included a story about Ryman once stopping a Christmas caroler mid-song and saying, "You're spitting on a grave with every note." The judge looked at Ryman. He finally said, "Ma'am, do you deny being at the defendant's property that night?" She opened her mouth, then paused. "I was trying to protect myself," she said. "From what?" "From the lies. From the poison of pretending grief ends." The judge sighed. "Grief does not give you the right to destroy property, threaten neighbors, or manipulate the law to control others. Your cease-and-desist is rejected. And you will be facing misdemeanor charges for trespassing, vandalism, and harassment." Ryman looked stunned. She started to cry, not the silent tears she'd worn before. This time they were ugly. Loud. I turned to Aunt Sharon. She didn't cry. But she did look smaller somehow. Outside, as everyone left, she caught up to me. "She lost her daughter," she said. "I lost my mom," I said. She nodded. "I thought she was helping me. But she was just making me feel special for staying sad." I didn't say anything. "I'm sorry," she added. I didn't forgive her. Not then. Maybe not ever. But I nodded once and walked away. It didn't end there. Ryman was ordered to pay restitution. I used the money to rebuild the porch and buy new lights. Every year since, we've added something new. This past Christmas, Ben helped me hang a big sign across the roof that said, "We remember in light." No one has touched it. Ryman moved a few months later. Quietly. No goodbye. Aunt Sharon wrote me letters. Sometimes I read them. Most times I don't. But I kept Mom's journal. I even added a few pages of my own. Not poetic. Just real. Just the truth. I made mistakes too. I let anger almost drown me. I wanted revenge, and maybe I got it. But in the end, it wasn't the court or the cameras that gave me peace. It was knowing that Mom would have kept the lights on, no matter what. So I did. And I will. Every single year.